Hey, I'm Brooks Brown. I wanted to make a relatively quick video to try to shed some light on the FOCUS Act. This is the Alabama law that's going into place this year, 2025, that will effectively ban cell phone use for students on public school campuses. So I'm going to read through the law initially so we kind of know what's in there. Everybody's on the same page. I know there's been a lot of talk about this online. Seems like maybe there's a little bit of misinformation, so I want to make sure we're all clear there. And then I'm actually going to talk about Dothan City Schools specific policies that they've had to put in place. That was required by the law that each public school board in their local area would create kind of an addendum or their own social media policy that would go along with the Focused Act. So we'll read through that as well. And then at the end, I'm going to give my take on kind of what I think this is going to do. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I'll preface that with saying I am the senior vice president and instructor for a company called the Little Network. We teach kids all over South Alabama how to get ready for the next step of life, whether that is career or college. So we're providing transition services for those kids. So over the past few years, this school year alone, I think I was in around 30 schools and talked to 1,000 plus kids. So at our company, we have kind of a unique perspective. We probably see more school environments than just about anyone, especially in Alabama. So like I said, at the end, once we go through everything and kind of understand what's in the law, then I'll give my take on it. So let's hop right in here to the law itself. So this at the top you see says HB 166, House Bill 166. If you want to look it up, you can look it up by this, or you can look up the Focus Act, which means freeing our classrooms of unnecessary screens for safety. That's where they come up with that acronym right there. So what are we doing here? This is to prohibit the use, operation, and possession of wireless communication devices on certain public school properties, to require local boards of education to adopt an internet safety policy. Like I said, we'll talk about that for Dothan City Schools, and to add section 164013 to the Code of Alabama 1975 to require students to complete a social media safety course prior to entering the 8th grade. I'll discuss that a bit as well. And then repeal old part of the code that's no longer going to be applicable due to this new law. So section 1, the legislator finds and declares the following: each student in Alabama public K through 12 school should be college ready or career ready upon high school graduation. So that's kind of the idea of school, right? We're getting ready for the next step of life. That's where our company comes in as well, to kind of be a little addition to that, to fill in some gaps if we can. Many high school teachers believe that cell phones and other electronic communication devices are distracting students in the classroom. Studies have shown that cell phones and other electronic communication devices are negatively impacting learning outcomes, and studies have shown that increased social media usage may negatively affect the mental health of school-age children. So we're going to go through some definitions here in section 2. So it's just kind of giving you an idea of, as we talk later in the law, as it's written, what do these terms mean? So an instructional day is the period of time during the public elementary or secondary school is open and in session for meeting the minimum number of instructional days pursuant to the code. So this is just instructional day is the school day. Wireless communication device. Pretty self-explanatory. Could be a couple surprises here. A cellular telephone, tablet, computer, laptop computer, pager. You still got one of those. Gaming device or any other portable electronic device identified in a wireless communication device policy that has a capability of exchanging voice message or other data communication with another electronic device. This could also mean your smartwatch. So keep that in mind. If your kid's got or if you're a student watching this, if you've got a smartwatch, Apple Watch, whatever, that's probably going to be off limits because those can take calls and send messages. So here we go. A written policy adopted by a local board of education to implement this act. So that has been required. They had to have that by, I believe, July 1st. Dothan has theirs published, and we will go over that after we finish with this law. So beginning with the 2025-2026 school year, so coming up pretty soon, no student shall use or operate any wireless communication device in any public elementary or secondary school building or on the grounds thereof during the instructional day. So that's pretty clear. No phones on campus, can't be, on your person or on during the school day. So 8 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, it's got to be turned off, put away. Beginning with this coming school year, no student may possess a wireless communication device in any public elementary school or secondary school building or on the grounds thereof during the instructional day unless the wireless communication device is turned off and stored off their person in a locker, car, or similar storage location. So this is kind of unusually written. Technically, they can have it at school, but it cannot be on them and it must be off. So if it's turned off, it could be in a locker, car, storage location. I know some schools are implementing these little pouches that they can be locked in. We'll see who all ends up rolling that out. I know there's some cost involved with that. So we'll probably start with the lockers, cars, that kind of thing, but can't be on them. Even if it's off, can't be on them, cannot be on their person. Notwithstanding sections A and B, a student may use, operate, or possess a wireless communication device in a public elementary or secondary school building or on the grounds thereof during the instructional day in any of the following circumstances. So here are our exceptions. The use, operation, or possession pursuant to the student's individualized education program, your IEP or your 504. So if it says in there, and if you have an IEP or a 504, you know it. If you're not familiar with either of these terms, you or your student probably does not have one. So if it's in their IEP as discussed with their counselor and with the school, then they can use their device for educational purposes. The use, operation, or possession is for educational and learning purposes under the supervision of a local board of education personnel. So if the teacher says we need to use our phones or tablets or something of the sort for an educational purpose, that's okay, but it's going to have to be signed off by both the teacher and the principal is going to have to approve it as well. The use, operation, or possession occurs during an emergency threatening the life or safety of students and another person. Now, I know that the emergency thing, local news channels put this out. I know local governments did the same thing as well. When this was signed, there's a lot of comments about what happens in an emergency situation. So we will discuss that. That is specifically highlighted later on. But if there's a life-threatening situation, the kid is permitted to use a phone. This is just telling us that each local school board is going to have to adopt a policy by July 1st that they're going to implement beyond this law. So we're going to talk about Dothans here in a minute. Every local school board had to have one as of July 1st. Okay, let's keep going. So what does this policy have to do? It's got to limit internet access by students to only age-appropriate subject matter. Makes plenty of sense. Shouldn't see any arguments there. I think that's kind of always been the way that it has been. Provides specific procedures and protections that prioritize the safety and security of students. Again, we'll get into that, but this is talking more about digital security. So email, chat rooms, other forms of electronic communication. So keeping kids safe while they're online. Prohibit access to students for unlawfully obtained information, including hacking or other unlawful online activity by students. That's a little unusual, but they're putting it in there anyway. Prohibit access to dangerous websites. That's what section 4 there says. Prohibit students from accessing social media platforms except when expressly directed by the teacher. So, we don't really want the kids at school on social media. There you go. It's a distraction. If we don't want them to do it on the phone, probably shouldn't do it on the computer either. And a principal shall be responsible for ensuring consistent compliance. So this is up to the principal. Good luck, folks. I know this is going to be a probably Herculean task for the administrators and principals involved. So we'll see how that plays out over the year. Everybody on what this says right here, everybody that's a part of the school, they're kind of tasked with keeping up on this. Teachers are going to be given surveys. This is what this next section is essentially saying here. There's going to be surveys that are turned into the principal by teachers. So this has been a common complaint in the past where places have tried to implement these rules, is that some teachers enforce it, some teachers don't. That has been the case in schools as they are, which really weakens the positions of teachers that are enforcing the rules. It makes life a whole lot harder on them. So by law now, they are going to have to submit some kind of survey. So each teacher will have to submit this to the principal. That'll be submitted to a local superintendent, so on and so forth. It moves up the chain for each person to anonymously say, is this being implemented as written? What else do we have? So this, again, implementing social media policies and phone policies for local school board. We're kind of repeating this. But additionally, they're saying that a course has to be developed. So a course for social media safety is going to have to be given to students that they're supposed to get it before they get into 8th grade. Obviously, students that are already past 8th grade can't meet that requirement. So if they transfer into the district, they will then have to make up that course, but it just has to be completed going forward before the child gets through 8th grade. So this is kind of giving them How do they safely use social media? What are the risks of social media? Interestingly, one of the classes that our company offers is a full social media class where we try to highlight the risks, the benefits, but risk as well. How does social media work? How are these people making their money? What are kind of the pitfalls with it? So that's what's all being covered here. The courses have to be made available online, and parents will be notified of how they can access that. So the kids can do this independently. They can do it outside of school. I kind of imagine maybe there will be a point where, maybe kids are given time to do this in school as well. For kids that may not have access, to the internet, computer, reliable internet connection outside of school. But we'll see how that goes. So that has to be put in place. These kids have to get this course before 8th grade, which I think is kind of an interesting thing to show sort of the state of the world we're in. So that's pretty much it. So signed by the House, Senate, and Kay Ivey. So you might see different versions of this bill. Be a little careful with that. If you go further back into previous versions of the bill, there was some different language in there that I've discovered has been removed. So make sure you're reading the actual law and not previous versions of the bill. So to sum that up, can't have, the phone on campus. So now let's jump into Dothan City Schools policy. So as we said multiple times in there, each school board is going to have their own rules, which is going to give us kind of more detail on how they're going to implement this. And so Dothan City has their policy. The reason I'm using Dothan City, we're in a bunch of counties in Alabama, but this is probably one of the bigger counties that we deal with. There's a lot of kids here. So I think this would be a good example. I imagine most areas will kind of follow suit. So let's see what we have here. Dothan City School Board recognizes that students carry personal electronic communication devices. Maybe not anymore. School board members also recognize that parents provide these devices for their children so they can be in touch in case of emergency. School requires students' attention. This is naturally a competitive area. They're on the phone, but we need their attention. That's the reason they're at school. In recent times, personal electronic devices have become a distraction in the classroom and also a source of concern, especially when used to video or take pictures of other students or bully using electronic methods. Please note in the case of extreme emergency, for example, a lockdown situation or active shooter, law enforcement shares that multiple cell phones, this is important here for everybody that's really concerned about the whole active shooter thing. I want to back up and start the sentence again. Please note that in the case of emergency, for example, lockdown situations or an active shooter, law enforcement shares that multiple cell phones and calls jam their systems, and also false statements of the situation can be shared, which often confounds the work of school officials, law enforcement, and emergency services. So I think this is a really good point. Of all the people that I saw, what happens if there's an emergency at school? I'm sure your kid is capable, smart, all this stuff. But do you want a 13-year-old or 15-year-old, 17-year-old in a potentially life-threatening situation? Do you want them to be paying attention to the adults who are specifically trained for these situations? They have to be trained in these situations. Do you want them to be listening to law enforcement, all these other people that are trying to help them? Or do you want them calling the shots on their own, on their phone, distracted, not listening to what's going on, not being quiet, having a phone go off that maybe reveals where they are in a room? So keep that in mind if you're concerned about that whole thing. And remember, this doesn't keep teachers from having phones on them. That's always been the case. So there will be a phone available, but also this has happened. Unfortunately, this is reality. But when there have been these dangerous situations in the past, false information starts getting put out because people, when they're in the heat of the moment, don't really understand what's going on. So they're saying things that is confusing law enforcement. Maybe they believe there's more or less people involved than there actually are, which can make the situation much more dangerous. So we kind of want a focused flow of information, and we want the kids to be really paying attention to the people that are going to be able to help them, not trying to figure this out on their own. So pursuant to the Freeing Our Classrooms of Unnecessary Screens for Safety Act, the above reasons, the following is proposed. So again, Focus Act, that's the law. It's just going to repeat here, essentially the basis of the law. They cannot have a phone on campus, gaming device, portable electronic device, any of that stuff on their person during the instructional day. Phones have to be turned off and stored off the student's person during school hours. It will be enforced during instructional day, meaning all school hours in both school buildings and on school grounds. So even if you're outside, whatever, you're walking between classes, still got to be off. The same rule still applies. You cannot have it on you. Students are explicitly prohibited from using any type of electronic devices to record audio or video segments at any school function or event, or to have the devices turned on during the instructional day. So this seems maybe a bit confusing, but we're saying during the instructional day, no school events. So pep rally during the day, phone's got to be off. Doesn't matter, even though it's not a class, it's still during the instructional day. Can't have the phone on you. So anytime the school is open, that's got to be the case. Transportation will allow cell phones on the bus if the phone is on silent or vibrate. So while your student is on the way to school or coming back from school, they can have the phone, but the phone has got to be on silent or on vibrate, so it's not a distraction to the driver, other people on the bus. Nothing in the policy shall prohibit a teacher or school official from allowing the use of these devices in a productive manner as part of the instructional lesson, approved specialized project, or for specific research with principal's prior approval per lesson. So again, I mentioned this before in the law, but a principal has to approve if a teacher can do this. So if they want to use it for some sort of project, it's great, but it's got to get signed off by the principal to make sure we're in accordance with all the rules here. The student may use, operate, or possess a wireless communication and device used for operation or possession occurs during an emergency threatening the life or safety of the student and another person. So everybody kind of goes to the worst case scenario of an active shooter, but let's think somebody gets hurt. Maybe a kid falls down, they're unresponsive. Something happens where we need to get emergency services. Kids can go grab the phone, turn it on, make a phone call, let somebody know. If they are in the very unusual situation where there's no teachers within shouting distance or whatever, keep in mind there's adults around. The phone is not the only resource here. The kids have other options. Again, we're going back through IEPs. So if your student has an IEP and they need a device for their individualized education plan, that can be permitted, but it's going to have to be approved by essentially everybody that's writing the IEP. So it can't just be at a parent's request or at a doctor's request. It's going to have to be approved. So it's got to be documented during the IEP meeting. Again, if your child or you has an IEP or 504, you're familiar with these meetings. They can be quite involved. So this is not something new. If IEP or 504 does not sound familiar to you, again, you probably do not have one, or your student does not have one. The use of personal cell phones for medical or educational purposes shall not be approved based solely on parent or physician request, only permitted when explicitly determined in the 504. There we go. So what are the consequences? This is the interesting part. They're a little bit different for the younger kids and the older kids. Kind of makes sense. Hopefully we don't have a ton of kids K through 5 that got a phone, but you never know anymore. So what are your consequences? If a student is guilty of unauthorized use, so they infringe upon this policy, use the device during school hours, the device will be taken and held by the school official. The parent or guardian will be contacted and expected to pick up the device at school. So the parent has to come get the phone. That's what's going to happen the first time. They take the phone, parent's got to come get it. That's it. Second time around, the device is taken, parent has to pick it up, but the student will be placed in in-school suspension or alternative placement. In Dothan, that would be something like Pass Academy, alternative school. Subsequent violations will result in collecting of a device. Parent or guardian will pick up the device and the student will be placed in school suspension, alternative placement for 3 to 5 days. And in addition to the student no longer being permitted to bring any electronic device on school campus. So if they do that, phone can't come back at all. It doesn't matter if it's off, doesn't matter if it's a locker, doesn't matter. After the third strike, you're done. No phone, no electronic device on campus. Refusal incurs a little higher penalty. We'll see that here with the older students. So 6 through 12, if a student is guilty of unauthorized use, same thing's going to happen. They're going to get their phone taken up. You're going to have to go get it. Parent has to go, or guardian has to go get it from the school. Second time, 3-day in-school suspension or alternative placement. Additionally, the phone is going to be taken. Third time around, phone's going to be taken. 5 days out of school suspension or alternative placement. So Pass Academy. So things kind of get ramped up here, especially for the older kids. Third time around, you're out for 5 days, whether that's pass or out of school suspension, and you're losing the phone. Again, after that third time, phone's not allowed back on campus. Doesn't matter. Here is something particularly interesting to me. Refusal to surrender the device when asked by the school official would be considered a code of conduct class 3, code 399 offense. If you don't know what that means, don't feel bad. I had to look it up too. This is considered a serious offense. There you go. Whatever that means to you. It's kind of a higher offense, which can incur much higher penalties. Sixth grade students will receive a 10-day alternative placement. So 10 days is at Pass Academy if you refuse to give up the phone when told to. 7th through 12th will receive, I think it's again 10 days. Maybe they had a little typo here. And an alternative placement as a consequence. In addition, student is no longer permitted to bring any electronic device on school campus. So again, the older the kids get, we expect more of them. We have higher consequences for not following the rules. And finally, the distribution or presentation of electronic recording or video material of students that may be construed as illegal. Forms of bullying or harassment or may cause disruptive activities within the school body will result in a code of conduct class 3, code 399, and 90 days at Pass Academy as a consequence. Just to put that in a frame of reference for you, the Dothan High School year is 177 instructional days. So if this were to happen, you will spend more than half of your school year at Pass Academy. Students guilty of this level of offense for violation of this policy should also lose their privilege to possess any electronic device on the campus for the remainder of the school year and may be subject to random searches of their possessions to ensure compliance with prohibition. So this is kind of the way it goes. You don't follow the rules, you're subject to higher scrutiny, including search. Now, here we go. So this comes along with that Code of Conduct Class 3. The board also reserves the right to legally prosecute any student suspected of criminal activity through the inappropriate use of electronic devices. The board assumes that no responsibility for loss, theft, or personal cell phone or communication devices. So they could actually, this is not talking about just having the phone out, but in these cases, distributing something that can be construed as illegal, certain pictures of certain people of a certain age. Yes, it does happen. Forms of bullying, harassment, or other things that could be destructive, they could actually take legal action against the student. And then they can take that phone and potentially search students for a phone if they think that that's going to be a continuing problem. So that's it for the law and the local rules themselves. You can kind of form your opinion. I'm going to give you mine. So like I said, I've talked to thousands of students over the past few years. I guess it's been 5 or 6 at this point, in dozens of schools all over South Alabama and Florida. I couldn't be happier about this law. I, as someone that works in education and someone who talks to lots of teachers, know that cell phone use has become a major, major problem. It is a huge distraction. But not only that, it is affecting kids in much bigger ways that I think people are not fully grasping. These kids are struggling mightily in a lot of ways. And I think the constant cell phone and social media use has a big piece to do with it. Another one of the classes we teach is communication. I can tell you that students are struggling worse and worse with communication now because they do it face to face so infrequently. And so I have a lot of specific cases of students that are woefully addicted to their phone. And yes, that is a real thing. Social media and smartphone addiction is real. It is quite serious. I have seen cases of it where taking a phone from a student has resulted in self-harm for that student because they are so incapable of operating without it. So yes, these devices can be incredibly addictive. There's a lot of things going on these phones that parents are not aware of. A lot of the stuff that I saw online, in these comments is that people say, oh, well, my kid only uses the phone to text me about their day or call me or whatever. I can almost guarantee you that's not the case. We are competing with a device that is purpose built by very intelligent people with almost endless funds to capture their attention. That's what the phone does. That's what social media does. All it is there to do is drive engagement for these companies to make a lot of money off of data and engagement with their product. And so we are trying to compete with that, and it is almost impossible. So I'm happy to see them go. I'm looking forward to this coming year. I really, really hope that these are implemented well. These rules are implemented well, and they are stuck to very strictly. Because I can tell you, I would love to go in a classroom again, and rather than when I would like to see kids up talking to each other, and have to say, all right, y'all quit talking and sit down, rather than, okay, take your AirPods out, turn your phone off. Anytime I go in a classroom, they're not talking to each other, looking at the phone. I would love to walk into a lunchroom during a break and see kids talking to each other, and not either filming videos for social media platforms or just sucked into their phone. It's sad. It really is sad. And it has greatly, greatly impacted these kids. And I think unless you're in these environments, it's really hard to see it from the outside. But again, this is not specific to any single school. Like I said, I think it was like 32 schools last year. This is a problem across the board. Any school that does not enforce their cell phone policies, we see it. So, it's not just school specific. It's kind of a cultural thing at this point. I really, really hope we're able to walk this back. Now, I mentioned that, cell phone and social media addiction is a very real thing. And it is. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about it if you want to get in contact with me directly. If you're concerned that you might be dealing with a student or a child that maybe has some level of addiction to their phone, I'd be happy to walk you through what that looks like, and then maybe what you can do to try to start walking that back. It would be a large undertaking, but it'd be well worth doing if you want to invest in that kid's future. Because in the beginning of that law, they state kind of that mission statement that the goal of K through 12 schools is to prepare kids for either career or college. That's what our company's doing. That's what these public schools are doing. And they're trying to prepare them for that environment. And I guarantee you that a student what will become an employee, when they get into the work world, if we're really trying to prepare them for a career, they cannot be on the phone all day at work. I worked with individual clients who have been fired from multiple jobs. These are not necessarily kids, they're young adults that have been fired from multiple jobs because they could not get off their phone. So this does have real world impacts. It's not just simple distractions. This could be detrimental to their future if we don't get this stuff under control now. And I'm hoping the Focus Act is a step in the right direction. But because this is a real thing, and I know maybe you've tried it with your students or kids, whatever, or maybe you've tried yourself getting away from phones for a little bit, and you figure out it's a little harder than you thought it would be. I really strongly encourage you to start working with your student right now. Whatever it is, July 15th. We don't have that much more time before school gets in. And if you just wait till the day before and this kid goes from using social media or the cell phone 6 to 8 hours a day, which is about the average, it's going to be very hard for them to go into that school day and not have it. We actually, I think I mentioned earlier, we actually see kids exhibit what looks like symptoms of withdrawal from a substance. So heightened anxiety. Some of them actually don't feel well when separated from their phone. So we don't want to just throw them into that. So I highly, highly recommend y'all start working on this now. Start backing off the social media use. Take some time off. Maybe you have a day a week that you don't use it at all. Restrict screen time a little bit. Talk to each other. And if you need a guide, beyond what I'm telling you here, I don't have anything to do with this book. I've just read it amongst others. I think it's some good advice in here. The Tech Exit, A Practical Guide to Freeing Kids and Teens from Smartphones by Claire Morrell. Sorry, Claire, if I pronounced that wrong. I'd recommend picking that up and looking through it. There's some great information in there. And even if you don't plan to implement everything or even anything in there, it can give you some really good information about what's actually going on with kids in these phones, and maybe give you a better picture of what's the reality of this. Is this just a distraction, or is there maybe something we need to be more concerned about here? So feel free to ask me any questions you have. I'd be happy to try to answer them. Again, we teach 20 different classes. We have 4 series of 5 classes, a full curriculum approved by the state of Alabama that we implement in public schools, quite a few, to try to prepare kids for the next step of life, whether that is career or college. So we have a little experience with this. Be happy to work with you or your student or your school. If you're an administrator looking at this, just reach out to us. You can learn a little bit more about the company at thelittlenetwork.com, or you can get in contact with me here. Appreciate you watching, and looking forward to the next school year.